Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Friday, August 30th. It is time. Cannot wait to see what happens Saturday at noon in Atlanta. Talking season is finally, mercifully, over. But writing season continues for Paul Strelo and I at TigerIllustrated.com. If you're not a member, today we have the most comprehensive preview article you can get with maybe a couple of surprises at the end. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's P-A-R-H-A-M law.com. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Its office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's C-E-L-E-R-O commerce.com. Okay, to our interview, Jon Blau of the Post and Courier. Jon parachuted into Clemson. Well, not really parachuted. Came here from Indiana 3 years ago. I'm sure not really knowing what to expect about this Clemson football thing, about the place. So he's got a really interesting perspective. Really enjoyed this conversation. Here we go. All right, joined by Jon Blau of the Post and Courier, the shop that I last worked at. I guess, boy, I feel old doing the math. 16 years ago, October of 2008 is when I made the move over to TigerIllustrated.com. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you, Larry?
Doing great. First of all, it's Friday before the start of the season. Do you get excited about the start of the season? Does it give you obviously fans get excited, and sports writers, media folks can still, not fans, but you can still experience the juice and the excitement of a big game in college football. Do you feel it? What does it feel like for you?
Yeah, I think it's just the mystery of what we're about to see. I'm just very interested to see what Clemson actually looks like. Obviously, we go through this whole period of time we call talking season, where everybody's obviously very confident about how good they're going to be. Every team, it seems like, is going to win a national championship. But you actually get to see what is real once you get to the opener. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited. I get kind of juiced. I think, though, maybe it's just more kind of relieved. I don't have to hear people give me their perspective, and I don't know if it's true or not. I just kind of let's get going.
Yes, totally. I don't hate, but it gets old. Writing about stuff you can't see, and writing about stuff that is not actual games. It's them going against each other, so they don't really, truly know until they play somebody, right?
Yeah, and obviously they're teammates, and so nobody on defense is going to say, yeah, Cade really sucked out there today. I mean, threw about 5 picks. I mean, we were killing him. I mean, they're not going to say that. And so But at the same time, if there's a certain amount of like specific enthusiasm about specific things, you can glean certain points, and it's interesting to hear. But yeah, like we're talking, you don't get to see any of this. Like we didn't even have any 11-on-11 periods that we got to see in camp at all. So we didn't even get that little snippet. And obviously, the scrimmages are close. So yeah, we really have no idea You're kind of taking what they're saying on faith. And yeah, once you get to see Clemson play a team like Georgia, you're absolutely going to know kind of where they're at. So that's kind of what's exciting about it, I think, for us as writers, kind of seeing where they're actually at.
I do kind of feel like as I go back, and I want to, of course, hear your perspective on this. If I go back to August 1st, compare that to now, August 30th, I do feel like I've learned more. I guess maybe you can just sort of get a sense of things. And again, sometimes it's not totally dead on and it could be far off. But I don't know. I just have a sense of confidence from the offense that maybe wasn't as present last year. You get a sense in talking to Garrett Riley, in talking to some of the defensive players, just their observations about Cade Klubnik and about the receiving core that has a full deck and the offensive line that has a full deck, fully healthy. It does. I do feel like we have learned something, even though we haven't seen much of anything. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I think maybe you maybe asked Khalil Barnes about this and got this response in terms of, he was talking about Coach Riley really being in his bag, in terms of calling plays, and Cade, obviously them having confidence in Cade. And obviously then we talked to Dabo Swinney about it, and he's like, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, we're running the same exact stuff. But just the fact that they can see that confidence in terms of the way Riley's calling plays, in terms of the way the offense is executing, I found that really interesting. And then this is just obviously an off the field thing and just a personality thing, but to hear the number of things we've heard about Cade Klubnik's leadership this offseason in terms of him getting everyone together just to review film, telling receivers, I want you in this specific spot, and talking in front of the whole team. I think Peter Woods was telling us about recently, like, hey, if you're just now getting hyped for this game, like, you should have been like this 3 weeks ago. Like, that you ain't ready if you're just now getting hyped for this game. So it sounds like Cade is matured, and we've heard that in terms of on the field, in terms of his feet and just his presence in the pocket calming down. And obviously, again, you go back to last year and just how much he just did not look comfortable at times. I think we've heard a lot of things that are interesting that definitely sound like something. Again, we have to see it. But to hear those things, and like Dabo Swinney saying the offensive line won in the first scrimmage, and obviously Matt Luke's coaching that unit now, there's a lot of stuff that sounds promising if you're a Clemson fan. But again, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they themselves are surprised by what the product is, because I feel like they would be very surprised if they don't have more successes in offense this year.
I think it's always instructive to go back to the previous year, previous August, and maybe the August before that, just to revisit, okay, what was I writing and what were people telling me then? What were they saying back then? And it's sometimes, like earlier this month, I was kind of startled to go back and read. I had sort of forgotten, but what I was writing was, man, there's really a feeling of rejuvenation with this offense, and Garrett Riley's presence, and the offensive line is playing really well, and the dirt raid. And I mean, we must have written about the dirt raid. We wrote about it a lot going into the season, not much after the season started. And then you go out and you have all that confidence, and maybe this is the lesson, is that you can be as confident as you want, but stuff tends to change when the lights are on and you're having to do it under the pressure of the stage and of another team. Like, Dabo has said about tomorrow, we need to be ready game one, play one. Well, I just went back about an hour ago and looked at the Duke game. Game one, Cade throw 2 and throw 3 were both just airmailed, like totally airmailed. And so at that point, confidence of the quarterback is clearly in some question. The confidence of the play caller is then a bit shaken because he's not going to be aggressive. And so we saw that, and we heard that from Kyle Richardson, I think in July, when he said their confidence was kind of shot after that Duke game, and they had to spend a long time sort of piecing it back together. So it's always instructive. Like you said, everybody's confident this time of year, but I think Dabo Swinney being confident is just and optimistic is his nature. And so he's always going to think, oh, we're going to have a good chance against this team, or of course we're confident, that kind of thing. So you have to sort of weigh all that. Have you gotten a sense of that during your time, not just right now or the last month, but over your time covering Clemson, that you have to sort of balance all that out given the personalities involved?
Yes. I always think about a Joe. You know, I remember talking to Dabo Swinney during my first fall camp. He's talking about, well, he's just got to make a choice whether he wants to be Sterling Sharp or Terrell Owens. And it's like he's saying he's going to be one Hall of Famer or another. And then a Joe's struggling to block people like on bubble screens, and obviously Becky from Gaffney's then calling on the radio show saying like, what are you doing? But it's like, yeah, I was writing all kinds of glowing stuff about Joe, and he's actually in the CFL now. Like he's actually recovered and is actually playing some pro football now. But, like I thought watching the spring game with the Joe and everything they were saying, like this guy's going to be a monster. It didn't quite turn out. So, I mean, that's the way things can be. I remember writing about DJ Uyunglele coming into my first season. And everybody's telling me how ice cold he is and just like such a calm, just like steady guy. And I remember I had this story on the front page, just like DJ Uyunglele is like made of ice or something like that. I forget what the headline was. And then they put it back on the website. But after the Georgia game, like they made it like a featured story on the Post and Courier. I'm like, guys, you got to take that down. Like you can't have that sitting there now because like it got proved completely wrong. And so, yeah, it's like I learned some lessons early on in terms of kind of the level of optimism and confidence. And obviously with DJ, that's a strange situation. I mean, every 5-star they had worked out for however many years. You just kind of expected it with him. But yeah, I think I've taken those lessons and been like, okay, I gotta, I know Dabo is going to be really excited about this guy, that guy, but until we see it, like we don't quite know. I think you kind of learn that as you go.
It's so funny. You mentioned the comparisons and we say, we're talking about this largely in good humor because Dabo has been right on a lot of guys too. Hunter Renfrow rings a bell, as he is apt to remind us time and time again. Adam Humphries and on down the line. So there have been plenty of pluses to go with the minuses, but the one that stands out to me, spring game long before you got here. This must have been 2006. He was still a receivers coach, Dabo was. And back then, this ought to tell you how long ago this was. I think all the assistants were available after the spring game. I remember he came up to the press box to talk to us. And somebody asked him, there's a guy named Rendrick Taylor who was a tight end. And he looked like an absolute monster. I mean, just ripped, muscular, just this massive human being, and he had a huge day in the spring game, catching the ball and running. And somebody asked him, "Hey, do you think Rendrick kind of is in the mold of like a Shannon Sharp maybe?" And he goes, "Shannon Sharp." He goes, "This isn't the next Shannon Sharp. This is the next Rendrick Taylor." And Rendrick never really or seldom really heard from again. But I think the optimism is really, I think it really helps. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame coach, so clearly the optimism has been a great positive in addition to these nitpicks, I think, that we're sitting here from the outside leveling at him.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff, I mean, you understand as a reporter, a lot of the stuff he's saying is for the players. I mean, he's trying to pump these guys up, get them to know that, like, I believe in you. When he's backing up DJ, backing up Cade during the season, that's because he knows there's a chance Cade or somebody that knows Cade or whoever's going to be watching this press conference, and he doesn't want, him hearing that he thinks he's, terrible at this, terrible at that, has no future, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, coaches are going to speak positively about their players, and Dabo is that to the hilt. I mean, he's just a guy who's very, very optimistic. He believes in the guys he's brought in. He's going to believe in them, maybe even past the point at which you want him to believe in them. But that works. Like you said, I mean, they've had tons of success. I mean, they went to 6 straight playoffs, won 2 national championships. He obviously has a decent eye for talent. He's a very good motivator. He deserves credit for that. And, more times than not, like you said, they do turn out, but obviously every coach is going to maybe have a little bit of warped perspective on their guy sometimes, because that is their guy and it doesn't always turn out. But yeah, I would say more times than not, Dabo has been able to be, pretty accurate in terms of guys' talent level and their potential, and it's worked out for him, obviously.
I did think Garrett Riley provided some really interesting and maybe revealing insight into Cade earlier this week when I asked Garrett just about Cade's increased comfort as a runner on his reads, primarily on the zone read and RPOs and such, because I have heard that he has been shown a lot of improvement at that during their scrimmages and such, and had some long runs. And what he said this week was a lot different from what he said a year ago, and I think I basically asked him the same thing going into the Duke game. Last year, he said, yeah, it depends on the flow of the game, what you feel like you need. Obviously, we need to protect our quarterback, da-da-da-da-da. You've got to weigh the risk-reward. We're going to do what it takes to win, but you don't really go into a game saying he needs this amount of runs or anything like that. So he's really kind of slow playing that, I guess, or being really conservative, saying we don't want to put too much on him. Whereas his answer this week was a lot more definitive, I think. And he said his legs are always going to be an X factor. I mean, it just has to be at the quarterback position. And whether that is design runs or him just managing the game the way he needs to, where he needs to scramble or take off or whatever, he is athletic enough to create some plays that way. So he's certainly going to be an X factor that way, not just in this game, but all season. He's going to need to be that for us. I mean, that's pretty telling. Like, notably timid a year ago, and notably not timid this week from Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's interesting. I'm just thinking about Cade's kind of progression as a prospect. I mean, going back to high school, I remember talking to some of the opposing coaches that played against him. Like, he was mostly a runner his sophomore year of high school. I mean, he was a guy that beat you with his legs a lot. I mean, he's got track speed. And then he gets to Clemson, and obviously had a great success as a passer in his career at Westlake too. But he gets to Clemson, and we think about that Syracuse game where he's basically coming in just handing off the ball or running it himself. It's most of the offense that they're doing with him. So we go into his sophomore year thinking, yeah, he's going to be a huge weapon on the ground. And that just didn't really happen because, like you said, it's probably just in terms of making the right reads. Obviously, he's not completely physically mature in terms of where he needs to be to take that kind of pounding. We really didn't see it. But, yeah, it was interesting to hear Garrett talk about him again as kind of an X factor that way and a weapon that way. And you would think he could be, just because he does have that speed. I mean, he should be able to make some plays when he makes the right read. And obviously he's 210 pounds now. So he's basically the size that Deshaun Watson was when he was at Clemson. I mean, he's more physically mature, and you probably feel better about him taking those hits and not fumbling the ball and X, Y, Z. So yeah, it was interesting. I think the way that, Garrett Riley phrased that, and I would not be surprised if he's kind of more confident in that phase and more able to, change a drive in terms of being able to pick up a huge chunk here or there, extend drives, extend plays with his legs. So I think he's always had it. It's just about kind of translating that to the college level.
Some of the problems last year with him went beyond just reads themselves. It was in at least two instances him doing the exact opposite of what his coaches had just told him to do in the timeout, late in a half or late in a game. And I'm referring to the end of the Miami game when it was, Cade, this is a direct handoff to Will Shipley. Do not run the ball. And he pulls it and runs. And then end of half against North Carolina, win during a timeout. Cade, this is our last timeout. I guess they were like the 6-yard line, 4-yard line, something like that. We're going to throw it, but whatever you do, if it's not there, throw it away. We'll kick a field goal. Whatever you do, do not run it. He runs it anyway. Gets lucky by scoring a touchdown barely. First of all, have you ever, in all your years of covering college sports, have you ever heard a coach say, yeah, he just didn't do what we told him to do coming out of a timeout?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, yeah. I mean, that was the surprising thing. I guess it's been surprising for me covering Clemson these 3 years because I arrived right after the playoff era. Just like the number of mistakes, just like that they're not, doing what they're supposed to do. I've probably not covered many teams at the high school, college, whatever level who have made this number of mistakes. I've heard their coach say they're making those mistakes. Obviously with Kate, like I always think about the Florida State game too, obviously, which they say they kind of take a little bit of blame in terms of we should have took the readout of that one he threw to the sideline when he should have just handed it off in overtime against Florida State. But just, the number of mistakes and the number of times we've heard about those mistakes, because you have to think there were probably other mistakes he made too that we just didn't pick up on or were not told about. Yeah, I mean, that is, it's been surprising just because I go back again. It's just like his first appearance. We saw him in the Georgia Tech game, that opener in 2022. He was so efficient in getting them down the field. He was so decisive. And that's like what you're going off of. And you're going off of the ACC title game, and obviously didn't look great in the bowl, but that happens. You're missing players sometimes. It's just bowls games are weird. But yeah, the number of times he just looked indecisive or just panicky or just kind of just didn't do the right thing, which is really, really surprising. And so, again, first-year starter, quarterback, you expect a guy to be more mature, more comfortable, expect some of that to get ironed out. But yeah, that has been interesting, or that was interesting last year. It'll be interesting to see if that kind of changes this year.
Can you give me your sense or your sort of window into just how big this game is and this season is for Dabo, his model, his culture, his way of doing things? I mean, it's been 3 years of sort of decline, albeit they've been pretty darn good at 30-10, but it's still not where they want to be. He, of course, we don't need to rehash all the stuff he gets criticized for, mostly nationally, but also increasingly from within, Clemson's own fan base. What is your feel for how big this matchup is tomorrow and this season is, just in terms of Clemson making a statement about its sort of stature, one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been interesting because obviously the success kind of tailing off a little bit from, like you said, from an impossibly high standard in terms of always being in the top four of the sport in the playoff and then winning national titles and stuff like that. But it overlapped with the transfer portal era, kind of with obviously, and then the NIL piece in terms of the inducements and all that. And so you see this immediate kind of just step back, and you have to kind of feel like you have to correlate it with that. Like, are they just not doing things the way that everybody else is doing them? But at the same time, it's been, years without that Trevor Lawrence, without the Deshaun Watson. I mean, that's going to happen. You're not going to hit on every single quarterback, and you're going to have years where you have injuries. And obviously 2021, 2023, a lot of the injuries we've seen over those years, I mean, and the fumbles, I mean, just wacky stuff has happened that makes you think, okay, maybe this is kind of an anomaly, and maybe, some of these really highly ranked players that they brought in are going to develop and they can get back to where they were. And so I do think, again, 3 years is kind of a little bit of a trend line. If you go a fourth, especially if you stay more healthy, and this is like a full cycle of guys that you've recruited that were supposed to be these 4 or 5-star guys, and you're not making the playoff, especially in the first year where it's 12 teams and there's much more opportunity to make it, that will only kind of take the narrative that's already been developing over the last however many years and, accelerate or, magnify, multiply it by whatever. I mean, so yeah, it's a really important year. Again, second year of Garrett Riley, second year of Kate Klubnik, Matt Luke. You've invested in the offensive line. You invested in Chris Rumph and Nick Eason. You've invested all of this into this program. You've obviously stuck to your guns as far as the transfer portal and believing in the guys you recruited and developing those guys. You have to have a step forward after some of these steps back. So I think it's a really huge year. Whether they have to win the Georgia game, they at least have to be competitive in the Georgia game for people not to freak out. But they have to have a good year. if they took a step back again and for some reason had an 8-4, 7-5 year, I mean, people are really gonna be anxious, and I think maybe for good reason. So yeah, it's a huge year. It's obviously a huge game to start the season, but a huge year for Dabo and just the program.
Is it possible, in your opinion, that the narrative or the referendum could go the other way if they're 11-1 by the end of the season and have an ACC title, whatever? Is it possible? I mean, we're still in the relative infancy of this thing. We're only a few years in, right? So, like, people are already questioning Florida State, their reliance on the transient part of college football, and I get it. A lot of this is recentism because they've only played one game, folks. But is it possible that coaches and just everybody else could rethink and say, you know what, the slow cook method does bring a lot of benefits that maybe we weren't considering, at the advent of the portal era, where it's just like, oh, you need to go to the portal for everything. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard the term Franken team, or I read it on Twitter, when people were talking about Florida State, just constantly taking all these pieces that didn't develop together and putting them together. It's not always going to mesh. And, I honestly voted Florida State third in my ACC preseason poll because I just wasn't sure you're replacing all those top-end guys with a bunch of new guys, and it doesn't always work out. And so, yeah, there might be some... Again, if Dabo Swinney goes 11-1, like you said, or have a great year where they go to they win a game or two in the college football playoff, people are going to say, well, if the worst that happens is we lose 3 or 4 games in a season, or 2, 3 or 4 games, and that's the worst we get, and then every 4 or 5 years we're winning a national title, or we're in contention to win a national title, maybe that's a better method. I mean, especially if you... I know obviously the NIL component's really difficult, with just some of the, schools out there that are paying absurd amounts of money, and obviously Clemson maybe not quite able to keep up. But I mean, if you're able to develop a culture where people come for more than that and they're willing to stay, and you're able to retain talent the way Dabo Swinney has, maybe that is, the way to go if you can do it. Obviously, Dabo's talked about it. If he was in a different situation, starting over somewhere, he'd probably be raiding the portal like everybody else because you're trying to be competitive. But obviously, he has the advantage of coming into this era, having won a couple national titles and having a brand. And if he can have a great year every 3 or 4 years, be in contention to win a national title, that's not bad. I mean, like you said, maybe some other programs look at that and say, hey, maybe there's actually something to what he's doing here. And it would make sense to kind of, like you said, do the way Dabo puts it is he's in the crock pot. He always talks about, the crock pot method of college football. Maybe that's what they would think of it as. I mean,
Kirby Smart has even said that's his preferred way too, because, just look at Carson Beck, he's stuck around. There are some others too. But Kirby said that, we've had to go into the portal because we've lost a ton of guys, so I don't know. It could be interesting to see this evolve in maybe ways that people aren't predicting with this sort of conventional sort of look at it, or popular, trendy, whatever you want to call it. You said you picked Florida State third in the preseason poll. I'm curious, are you the type that when last Saturday they are falling all over themselves and can't do anything, are you the type on Twitter to say, yep, I picked that, folks. I got that right. Are you the type to? I don't sense that you are, although I don't read every single one of your tweets. But do you feel compelled to brag about stuff that you got right?
I try not to be overly snarky. I think it's funny sometimes. I mean, I actually did on that one though. I was just like, hey guys, actually they were third on mine. Just letting you know. And obviously, I'm saying it with a little bit of like a dry sense of humor. I don't know if that always reads, But yeah, no. Generally, I don't. I generally keep that stuff pretty tight to the vest. I'm not someone out here being like, well, I did this and I said this and I think this, because I don't think that what I think is often that important. I mean, I do think that it's sometimes funny, and so I'll make a little bit of a joke. But but yeah, not generally, but yeah, in that instance, actually, that is one of the rare instances where I did come out, because I just thought it was kind of like, yeah, no, I mean, again, all the transfers, and you're losing Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson and Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk. It's like, I did think that the hype there was a little overplayed, especially going into an opener. I mean, those things are wacky, and so yeah, I did bring that one up, but I don't bring them up that often.
It's always amusing to follow the typical Twitter discourse, message board discourse, whatever, during a game, over the course of a 3.5 hour game. Although the Florida State Georgia Tech one was just gold. I mean, you had to be on social media for that, just watching the world burn for Florida State. But it always amuses me. It's just kind of like human nature. You'll see, 5 minutes into a game, somebody will say, "Oh God, DJ is terrible," or DJ doesn't look that bad. Well, then somebody will invariably say, somebody will argue with you or whoever it is, and so then you'll clap back at them, and so then you're married to that take for the rest of the game, and so you're less inclined to have a measured view of whatever whatever player or team you're assessing, and so it just devolves into this just a mess where it's hard to have a clear-headed, fair-minded opinion when you've entrenched yourself into one opinion. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the one advantage I have with that is that I actually did work at NFL Films for 3 years, and I worked on an X's and O show called Playbook, which actually doesn't exist anymore. But a lot of what I was taught, like watching game film, is like, you can criticize the play and say that didn't look very good or whatever, but you can't really infer into their intention. And you can't know really on any given series what might have gone wrong. It might not have been the quarterback. It might have been the left guard didn't pick up a certain guy, and all of a sudden something's flashing in front of his face and he, panics, or it's 11 versus 11. And there's all kinds of things that you can't quite see either on the television, even when we're up in the press box watching what actually is happening, or like where the fault lies. And so you have to be careful when you're kind of trying to point out like who sucks and who's great, and like,
yes.
Because a lot of it might just be the circumstance, and they have a bad game. I mean, they're human beings. They have a bad game. It doesn't mean they suck 100%. And so like, I do think I was lucky that way. And so I try on Twitter. I'm probably way too active on Twitter than I should be, because I'm just trying to like note for people who aren't watching, like, hey, this happened. That was interesting, blah, blah. And I think we do as reporters get a little too sucked into it when it's, it's distracting from us watching the game, A, and B, it's like, who cares what I thought about that one play, a quarter ago or 10 plays ago, because it doesn't even matter now at this point. But yeah, I try to not engage in that as much as possible, just because I do have that experience from actually being with football people and hearing them explain how things work or can work, because you don't know what you don't know. And I kind of keep that in my mind as much as possible, that I do not know necessarily what happened on that play. And, Dabo's not going to talk to me and take me into the film room afterwards and tell me what it is. But, I can kind of keep the possibilities open and not drill too deeply into entrench myself, like you said, in a certain opinion.
Two of the best examples that always sort of drive me crazy, and I'll go offense and defense. It involves not being able to distinguish responsibilities just based off of if they're playing zone or man. All right. So like on defense, if a long pass is completed and you see a defensive back in the vicinity who is not where, not close to that receiver, automatically, such and such, number 22 got burned.
Right.
Well, but if you look, he's playing zone, so maybe the safety wasn't where he was supposed to be, and it was a miscommunication. And then on offense, and this actually happened last night in the NC State game, Grayson McCall threw a little flat, a little underneath route, and it looked like a really bad throw or decision, because the linebacker, the outside sort of overhang linebacker, really should have had a pick six, but didn't get there in time. So what it looks like is a bust for the quarterback, Tom Luganbill, who's an excellent analyst, said, the receiver thought it was zone when it was man, and so he broke off. He sat into his route instead of carrying it out to the outside, which he should have done in man coverage. Grayson McCall thought it was man coverage, so he threw to where the receiver should have been. And so, yeah, that's fascinating that you were at that you spent that much time at NFL Films. But those are like basic things, for. I don't want to say people who are in the game or you have to have played the game. I hate when people play that card, but that's not really that hard to understand. And there are so many things that are over the course of a 3.5 hour game, and responsibilities and assignments and such.
Yeah. And obviously on social media, it's all reactionary, and obviously fans are emotional people. I mean, they're fanatical. That's why they're fans. And so they want something to blame. They want to understand very quickly what they think happened. And so, like you said, with the defensive back example, that's the one I always think of. I mean, it's like, so, Andrew Makuba is trailing behind that guy. So Andrew Makuba must have got burned. Like, what was Andrew Makuba doing? Well, actually, there was supposed to be another guy over here or over there that was supposed to be over the top or whatever. And it's people just don't get that in the moment. And obviously with our culture, with social media, it's like we have to react immediately. And me personally, I would love to just be able to watch the tape again and like really slow it down and like rewind it like 5 times to really kind of get a sense of what's going on. But obviously we're all trying to react in the moment. So yeah, no, it's basic, but at the same time, a lot of people don't take it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. A lot of people want to think they know more than they do. And then they, obviously extrapolate based on what they think they know when they don't take the second to question, wait, do I not know what I think I know? and just, take a second and take a breath. And so, yeah, it is the way it is. And again, like I said, I try to not engage in some of that stuff. I'm sure I have. Every once in a while, I remember every now and again, I'll get a tweet during a game like, no, John, like you showed the replay and the analyst told us this is what happened. It's like, okay. There you go. But yeah, it's like we all engage in it to a certain extent, but you have to be careful for sure.
I know that when you have a Twitter presence, which of course is free, and you work for a publication or an outlet that is built on subscriptions, settling on a strategy, it can be kind of a tough balance to figure out, okay, I do want to be out there on Twitter to promote my company and the work that I'm doing, but I don't want to do it so much that people who pay my salary might say, oh, well, I don't really need to read John's stories if I'm going to be able to read everything that I need to read just following his Twitter feed. What are your sort of deeper philosophical thoughts on that balance and how to sort of manage it as you're covering a game or even just going through the week, just doing your job?
Yeah, no, that's really hard balance. Like, I don't even know if I have a great philosophy kind of developed with it, because it's just, I mean, obviously we're all at press conferences and people want to know, like, well, Dabo just said this thing, so like, should I put out that he says, Sheldon Lewis, Jaden Lucas day to day, obviously no new information, but people want to know what Dabo said. And so you're trying to get that stuff out there. And I know that if I hide that piece of information and, try to put it in an article and say, well, click here, please to read it. Like, a lot of those people have already seen it online or on Twitter. So it's like, you're trying to be in that space for some of that stuff so that you're not, oblivious or seeming oblivious. But at the same time, I mean, there's plenty of really cool quotes or interesting stuff that you're able to glean from asking a certain question. You would like to like hold it back, and I'm going to put it, in a story. But then, I see an hour later, some TV person got the entire quote. They put it on Twitter, packaged it, 100 retweets, and you're like, oh man, should I put that out there myself? So it's a really weird competitive balance. I guess the way I kind of approach things is I try to get a lot of stuff that's not at the press conferences. Like, obviously I ask a lot of questions there, but I try to be the person who's writing more in-depth features about these guys and going talking to people when the press conferences aren't happening. And that's the information that I'm giving you. That's obviously, please pay for it, and support my work and stuff. But so I guess my philosophy is like, going to, bring in as much information as I can. I'm going to distribute a lot of it online on Twitter so that people know I'm there, so that people know that, they follow me to try to get that information a little more instantaneously, some of it. And then hopefully please click on some of the stuff. I mean, I guess, but it's kind of it's a hard balance. I think you can get sucked in. I often do find myself questioning, like, should I have tweeted that? Maybe I should have just stayed, kept that information back a little bit and packaged it better in a story. Maybe, I could scale back. You always question that. I do wonder sometimes if I tweet a little too much, but it's, again, like philosophically, I feel like I'm all over the place sometimes with it, but, it's a hard balance because you're just in this competitive world and you're trying to, feed all these different, audiences, but you're also trying to, again, get paid for your work, which is obviously the stuff that's on the website.
What about your mentions? How often do you check that? How often do you converse with people who are in your mentions and who are replying and such?
Yeah, I try to be pretty conversant. I mean, I try to get back to most people that get back to me. I mean, there are a select few, I will admit, that get muted that I don't see. I mean, if you're someone who's in my mentions all the time, just being really mean or just really negative or whatever, like, I'm obviously under no obligation to read your stuff and to converse with you. And so there are some people that will get muted, I'm sorry to say. But if you just want to have a conversation and you say something like, hey, I think this, or like, hey, actually, I saw that, or obviously anybody who says thank you or says something nice, I try to get back to every single one of those. Try to treat everybody like they're an actual person on there because that's what they are. But obviously there's a lot of troll accounts. There's a lot of people who are just on there just to be controversial or mean or whatever. Many of those, unfortunately, have already been muted. I don't even see what they say. So it is what it is. That's kind of how I manage it. Cause obviously you have no control over who comes to you on there. But you do have control if multiple times they've been kind of not nice, whether I have to read it or converse with you. But most people, I think I converse with. I try to be pretty conversant with most people.
Upstate foodies, want to take a moment to talk to you about our favorite taco spot, Willie Taco. 5 locations across the upstate. This award-winning team has been serving up fresh taco fusion for a solid decade now. The chefs at Willie Taco utilize the freshest, most creative, and sometimes unexpected ingredients in their kitchens. Come see why Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and Food and Wine Magazine are raving about Willie Taco and their signature offerings, such as their Southern Tide, crispy avocado, Nashville hot chicken tacos, literally flavors you will not find anywhere else, folks. And don't forget about the cocktails. Super fresh margaritas, ice cold cerveza, and over 80 tequilas served up daily from behind the bar. So don't wait, folks. Your Willie Taco Familia is ready to serve you up their twist on funky, fresh fusion. It's the Willie way. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Well, you've done a great job of creating a niche as a really good storyteller, of finding angles that most people aren't thinking of, and just having fresh angles, fresh story ideas, sort of off the beaten path that I think a lot of Clemson folks have picked up on that and realized that. Do you have a process? I mean, doing that is hard. So for me, most of the time, my job is, all right, what can I tell people today that they're not going to get anywhere else? And it's usually more, I guess, newsy, analytical, maybe behind the scenes stuff. And I guess that's my niche. I mean, I enjoy storytelling, but doing what you do is difficult because you have to talk to a lot of people. You have to track people down, maybe like people in players' backgrounds, like parents and high school coaches and such. And you have to come up with that stuff from scratch, basically. So what is your process for doing that? And do you feel that's really your wheelhouse and that's what you love most about doing this job?
Yeah, that's definitely what I enjoy the most. My process is kind of as like a grinder. Like it's the way I would kind of describe it. I'm not like the most talented storyteller in the world. I know there are some people that are just really incredibly gifted that I don't even quite have that level of, thinking or art to what I do. But like, I just try to show up every single day at availabilities and ask, a lot of questions. And in the process of asking a lot of questions, eventually I'll have a sense of, okay, well, that's actually a really interesting story with that player right there. Like I remember you did a podcast with Tristan Lee's mother.
Yep.
Like I remember just the fact that this guy used to be a 5-star recruit. Everybody expects things from these guys like immediately. And you just notice like how nice he was. Like you're just like, you're having this conversation with him and he's just like talking about how, well, it's my fault. Like I didn't do this. Like I threw that guy into Phil. That's my fault. And he just like, you could tell there's like he's just different. And you're like, I'm going to find out more about that. And so I try to get Tristan Lee's mom on the phone. She tells me about all these other things he's done in high school that are pretty incredible. Like, a classmate with special needs who was having an issue in class and people were starting to chuckle at her, and Tristan just stands up and be like, yo guys, no, we're not doing that. And then a guy who again comes to Clemson and as a 5-star could be the cockiest guy in the world if he wants to be, could feel terrible about himself when he's getting buried by Miles Murphy on the field in one-on-one drills. But he doesn't give up. Like I just love that guy's different in that way in terms of his personality, in terms of his resilience, in terms of all those things. Like that's what gets me juiced. And so it's I'll go to all the availabilities to try to get a sense of who these guys are, like what they're dealing with, like what's unique about them. And then when I get home, like I try to get as many parents, like you said, parents, coaches, whoever on the phone, and drill deeper into that. And usually you find some really interesting tidbits and stories about them that kind of explain that thing that everybody already knows is happening, as far as like this player is starting, or this player like Philip Lorenzo, the long snapper, just recovered a fumble against Notre Dame. How did he get here? Like, he actually like literally begged his way on, and he met a guy named Rudy who happened to know somebody at Clemson who knew somebody else who like finally got him in the door. And then now he's recovered that fumble against Notre Dame. Like, who is this person? So that's kind of the way I approach it. And I think it's just by talking to a lot of people, having conversations that go way too long. I feel like I have so many conversations with sources that go for like an hour, when like a lot of people would be more, direct to be like, I'm just going to ask these 10 questions and these are my questions. I try to listen to what they say and be like, wait, tell me more about that. That was kind of interesting. And that's kind of the way I think I approach it. I try to think of myself as more of a person who's writing about people, and they just happen to be playing sports, than writing about sports, because that appeals to a broader audience. It's just the stuff I'm interested in. So that's kind of my process. I wouldn't say it's anything all that fancy, but it's just a lot of hours, having no life, just talking to people and seeing what I can get.
Well, a Post and Courier legend and one of my mentors a long time ago, Ken Berger. I'm sure you've heard that name. Yes. His advice to me and plenty of others, it's really not that complicated, Larry. Write about people. So, seems like you've nailed that part, and he would be proud. You live in Greenville. I'm curious, is the car time, the windshield time, good for you in sort of letting your brain formulate some of these ideas? Like when you're headed home from a press conference, you're like, oh, that was an interesting thing. I think I'm gonna call this person and maybe ask more about that. Is that helpful for you to be able to have that drive time to sort of help process your ideas?
Yeah, no, I think it is, and I spent a lot of that time in the car, usually thinking about the press conference. Like, I really should ask this question, that question, and that question bombed. I should ask this other question. That would have been way better. I do a lot of that, but then you think about the questions you could have asked, and you're like, well, who else could tell me something about that? Like, oh wait, I could go talk to their high school coach. I could try to get their mom or dad on the phone. I could work that and then try to come back to them and be like, hey, I talked to this person and I had this very specific story. Can you talk to me about that very specific thing I just heard about? And so, yeah, that's good. I mean, sometimes I'll use it in terms of like, I'll write, obviously send my story in like, yeah, I need like that 45, 50 minutes to be away from it. I get back. It's like, okay, yeah, no, I could have written that sentence better. Actually, there was this one fact I didn't put in there. I should really add that quote or this fact or whatever. It does help. I think you find a way to make it work to your advantage. Obviously, a lot of miles, a lot of burned hours driving back from Greenville to Clemson to Greenville both ways. But yeah, I think you can kind of figure out ways to make it work for you. To think of ideas, to think of questions I'm going to ask on the way to the press conference at Clemson that maybe I wouldn't get if I was kind of just driving 5 minutes from my place. Or how long does it take to get from like Central to Clemson? I don't know. That'd be like 15 minutes or whatever.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So I don't have very good story ideas, John, as a result.
You have plenty of good ones. I see it all the time. I'm jealous.
Clearly you like a lot of the elements of your job. You're enthusiastic about it. You have to be. Are there any parts of it that you don't like or that you dread? I know that I dread about mid to late July. There's always a sense of dread of, oh man, summer's over, and I don't really like covering August camp because I can't see anything. It usually lasts for like a day once camp starts, and then I'm energized again. Are there any parts of the year or the rhythms of it or the routine of it for you that are kind of a drag?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, to be very honest, again, I'm just a very quiet person, and I hate other people listening to me talk. And obviously we're doing this now on a podcast, so a little weird. But like, press conferences where I have to ask a question in front of like 15 other people, like it's like, I'm like, did I sound okay? Like, did this come out all right? Like, and I sit in the very front because like I just want to be as close to that person as possible to feel like I'm having a normal conversation with them. I don't like the whole they're up on a podium with a microphone and I'm down here, in front of the computer throwing stuff at you. And obviously at Clemson's unique too, because obviously at a lot of universities, they call on people and you have to go one at a time or you have like a microphone or something. We are just like shouting stuff at people. And so like I'll oftentimes like be like a syllable into a question and all of a sudden somebody else is asking it. And I just have to shut up. It's very awkward.
I've been there.
I mean, yeah. So those are the things. I mean, I think Twitter, again, like sometimes, just like you said, just being really like into it and then people just not, being nice or just being weird and you have to read all their stuff. I mean, there's some of that I don't really love. I would love to be disconnected from my phone a little bit more than I am. I mean, obviously breaking news situations, deadlines, 8 p.m. game when right after the game, it's like, John, we need this story. And like right now, the game just ended. We need it like right now. That's never fun. So there's that, obviously competitive pressure, trying to get things out before other people. There's a ton of stuff that, can be, a little bit of an emotional roller coaster we're dealing with in terms of just, trying to do our jobs well, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist sometimes, messing up publicly. I mean, that kind of stuff is weird, but I mean, that's basically it. But again, yeah, I think the mission and the stuff I can eventually accomplish if I do my job well, like it outweighs some of the stressors, the deadline pressure, being a public figure to a certain extent thing that I don't exactly love. But yeah, I mean, I think it balances itself out, I think, for the most part.
Your first season was 21, right? Yeah.
So I arrived, Gene Sapikoff sent me a DM and was like, hey, you want to cover this program? It's been to the CFP like 6 straight times, a couple national titles. I'm like, okay, this is weird and random. Like, I had never met Gene Sapakoff in my life. I did not, honestly did not really follow Clemson that closely before I got here. And so, yeah, I arrived, and it's always the joke I tell people is like, they haven't been back since. Like, I think I told Gene, like, when he retired, like, I don't blame you for the fact that they haven't been back since you told me to come down here and cover this program. But yeah, 2021, that was a shell shock of a year for sure with the way that went down.
You don't need to remind Dabo about the time that you took over, because he might bring it up in a press conference, like he's brought up Chappell's interception, non-interception mention of that streak last year.
Yeah, that's always funny. It's always whenever there's an interception, he's going to bring up Chappell. Where are you at, Chappell? Yeah. Kate keeps throwing interceptions. Why do you have to ask about him not throwing interceptions? It's funny. So hopefully he doesn't listen to your podcast, Larry. I hope that's.
I don't think he does. Do you?
Okay, we're good.
What is from having been around Dabo on a regular basis for 3+ seasons? What is your take on him and how he's perceived, and on a lot of the sort of the negative and worse things said about him from afar? How do you sort of balance that, and do you have I don't know, what's your sort of view of him, your big picture view of him, given what you've witnessed from up close?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I remember when I was looking into the job down here, a lot of the people up in Indiana, and I think just nationally, there's kind of more of a surface level view of him that are just the sound bites in terms of the stuff he says that maybe doesn't go over well with, the national media or everyone else. And so I remember, I think it should be fine to disclose, Larry. I remember talking to you because Gene gave me like everybody's numbers and like talk to every reporter you want to about what it's like down here. I remember asking you like, what's it like to work with Dabo? Because I had no idea like if it was a good thing. Like I had Tom Allen up in Indiana, like he was like a really nice, personable guy. And I was like, this is a pretty good situation. I like this. And so I wasn't sure. I remember thinking like, I don't know what this guy's going to really be like. And honestly, when you deal with him like on a day-to-day basis, I think you come to understand some of the stuff that goes out there and people don't like. I mean, he's just speaking his mind. He's just saying stuff off the cuff. He's a pretty natural, casual guy. I mean, for the most part, I know obviously that hasn't always been the case. I'm sure there's been times or seasons where he's been under stress and maybe it's not always happy. And obviously I've seen the clips of like the Clemsoning thing off on David Hale and stuff. But I mean, I know that stuff has happened, but honestly, my experience of him has been pretty pretty chill. I mean, pretty much like you can ask him pretty much anything. He's going to answer you honestly, or again, maybe overly optimistically. We were talking about earlier in terms of how he thinks and what he believes. And it's pretty approachable in that way. Like I've honestly had a pretty good experience with him. Like I understand, I guess, at this point why you don't really hear a lot of former players saying anything negative about Dabo Swinney. Because I mean, you can tell he really cares about his guys. I mean, they feel that there's obviously a pretty good culture in the program just because of how tight they are. And obviously Dabo leads that. And so it's been pretty cool. I mean, every now and again, he'll say something and I'm like, this isn't going to go over well, Dabo. Like, you probably shouldn't have said it that way. But otherwise, I mean, like I've enjoyed it. Like, I think it's a pretty cool environment just to be able to kind of shoot questions at him and he'll tell you what he thinks.
Has he ever snapped at you?
I don't remember him ever snapping at me. I remember maybe like a couple of like sideways looks, like, where are you going with this question? Like, nuts, like I remember asking about, in camp, anybody that's really surprised you or come out. He's like, no, too early. Not handing out any sugar yet, like that type of thing. Like, every now and again, like I shouldn't have asked that question. That was stupid, but I can't think of anywhere or any situation really where he snapped at me yet. I don't think I've ever, been there. Again, he's pretty honest about when they haven't been good. I mean, when things are not going well. I mean, so if you ask him like, why didn't that go well or why that happened, he'll tell you, yeah, Cade did the wrong thing. And so it's haven't really had any situations yet where I've gotten the David Hale Clemsoning treatment or anything like that yet.
With him, it's been fascinating. Like the last month, I've been watching a lot of Kirby Smart press conferences, and it dawned on me last week just how different these two are. Like, I mean, of course, Dabo has a lot more cold-blooded nature in him than people think on the outside. He's got a lot more Saban in him than people think. A lot of similarities behind closed doors, I think, between their styles of leadership, Dabo's and Kirby's. But like in a press conference setting, I swear Kirby has not cracked a smile in the last month on camera. I mean, it is no nonsense. Whereas Dabo, even though he's locked in or whatever, like he'll find a way to laugh and cut up about something. He could be 10 minutes removed from watching a player blow out his knee, and he's still going to find a way to be happy and to experience some laughter on something. It's just crazy how different these two are and how they sort of project themselves and carry themselves when the cameras are on.
Yeah, I can't imagine covering him or like Nick Saban or Bill Belichick or some of these guys that are just really, really just seem upset to be there. I mean, it just don't seem like they want to talk to you. This is something that they have to do. They don't want to like show any emotion or any personality or anything. It's very adversarial. And you talk about like finding humor. I remember like the day after the Tyler from Spartanburg call last year, it's like he's coming in asking everybody what they're doing for Halloween. He's like, so what are you dressing up as? And like, what are you doing, Larry? And he's just having a good time. And I think what Phil Kornblut said, I'm dressing up as Tyler from Spartanburg. And then, Dabo's laughing. It's like, he brings that spirit most of the time. Obviously, he's disappointed when they lose, and you can tell when it happens. But yeah, it is kind of nice that you got a coach that doesn't seem to take himself that seriously. Seems to again be good humored most of the time, and is fine being there interacting with you. He doesn't seem like he's unhappy to be there. And
even though access has been cut down in recent years, which to assistant coaches, I don't like that. The positive is that Dabo is exceedingly available. Like, even after he sits with us on a Tuesday for his regular, weekly formal press conference during the season for an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. The very next day after practice, in what he could easily sort of get away with being okay, 10 minutes, guys. I've already talked to y'all yesterday. We're not gonna have a long press conference here. He'll sit there for 30 minutes if you have that many questions. He's probably not gonna cut it off. And so there's always something interesting that he says. I mean, I say that even after covering him all this time, it's still interesting. Every single one is definitely not boring.
No, yeah, absolutely not. I mean, he's always going to have a quote. He's always going to say something that's, Ben Boulware, I remember he came in as a volunteer intern. I was like, you were a crappy fan, man, but hope you better be a better coach. I mean, he's just always willing to put the dig out there, the joke. It's always something. Like you said, yeah, we have a press conference on Tuesdays, and then he'll have a Zoom on Wednesdays, and I feel like mostly it's just because we've run out of questions. I mean, we've only talked to him like an hour yesterday. How much has changed in a day? Like, not a lot. So, like, I personally don't have a lot to ask him. But, once, there are a couple reporters like to ask a lot of questions on those Wednesday Zooms. Once they've run out, it's kind of over. But, yeah, we get plenty of access. I mean, Tuesday, Wednesday, talk to him on Sunday, to do it over again. I mean, and obviously Saturday after a game. Obviously, like you said, some of the access has been cut down to like assistant coaches and things like that. I mean, that you'd love to see that, still be there. But as far as like talking to him and having that access, it's pretty good. It's really good for a head coach of a major college football program.
What do you think about tomorrow? What's your feel? What do you have a leaning? What's your outlook? What are you expecting?
Yeah, again, it's so much of a see it to believe it type of situation with this team that I'm not going to believe the offense has turned this corner until I see it. And so, Georgia's obviously just supremely talented. And so, I'll just blow my score prediction. I think I got like Georgia 27, like Clemson 14, just because I don't think Georgia's going to score 1,000,000 points. At the same time, you do have a couple guys in the secondary, and Jaden Lucas and Sheldon Lewis, that might be missing. And so that will be interesting to see what that looks like. But I don't think they're going to score 40 on Clemson. I mean, Clemson's got a good defense. But until I see Clemson's offense, until I see Klubnik, actually making those correct decisions, keeping drives alive with his legs, until I see the offensive line actually be able to move Georgia and get Phil Maffa going and kind of stay on schedule, I can't really predict a bunch of points. I mean, you can have a feel and think maybe it's going to be that way, but I don't know yet. So I could see it being anything from Clemson losing by 3 points to them winning by 7 to losing by 30. I mean, it really could be anything. That's kind of the way I feel about it going in. It's very, very much a mystery.
Well, Jon, best of luck covering your 4th season of Clemson's football program. I look forward to covering it with you, and it's a pleasure to have you around. And once again, you do a wonderful job.
I appreciate it. It's an honor. Thanks, Larry. You do a great job, too.
All right. Thanks to Jon for joining us. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for the Post and Courier and everybody who is in that beat job covering Clemson. Fond memories of moving up here back in December of 2003 and having that job from that point until October of 2008. Appreciate the long-running support of our sponsors for helping make this happen. And, of course, eternally grateful to every one of you for continuing to listen. Cheers.